Well, food prices and non-alcohol beverages in South Africa increased by 13.4% year-on-year in January 2023, the highest hike compared to April 2009 after a 12.4% rise in December. Notably, price growth was observed for bread and cereals, which is at 21.8%. Oils and fats have increased by 18.5%, and vegetables have gone up by 14.3%. The South African Reserve Bank last month raised its 2023 forecast for food price inflation to 7.3% from 6.2%. As inflation declines, why are food prices still on the rise? We unpack this with Mervyn Abrahams, the program coordinator of the Pietermaritzburg Economic Justice and Dignity Group. We also have Malapane Thamaga, agricultural economist and member of the African Farmers Association of South Africa. Gentlemen, good evening. Good to have you, and thank you very much for your time. Let me start with you, Mervyn. If you look at onions, just the month of January alone, the price jumping by 48.7%. Maize meal, 36.5%. Laundry soap, 34.2%. Is there any justification for this? Does it make any sense to you why these prices would jump so high?
Good evening, Thabo, and good evening to all your viewers. Thabo, there is various mysteries within the food value chain. The farmers will tell you that they are not getting massive increases in the price at the farm gate. However, we are seeing a lot of these price increases at retail level. And so the question really is, where do these increases happen in the food value chain? Having said that, however, we also have to take note of the fact that various climatic conditions. So the summer in South Africa has seen enormous amount of rainfall, and that has a direct impact, for instance, on harvesting of onions and potatoes in particular. And so that would also have contributed to some of these price increases. But whether these levels of price increases are justified or not, really that's a serious question, because when you speak to farmers, they say, well, their level of increase is about 2 to 3% over last year. But when you look at retail level, then you see things like 30% on potatoes year on year, and 75% on onions, for instance, year on year, and 17% on maize meal year on year, and of course 18% on bread year on year. So really there has to be some kind of questions as to why this is in fact happening.
Well, Malapane, let's bring you in here. I mean, the Competition Commission is about to conduct its own inquiry into finding out exactly what happens at the point of production. Maybe you can assist us there. What is actually going into the production of onions, potatoes, beetroot, fresh produce in general, that is giving us the kind of prices that we are seeing at a retail level?
Yeah, Mr. Mzuli, thank you for inviting me, and good evening. Good evening also to the viewers at home. Maybe let me start by acknowledging that, we have one of the very resilient and very adaptive agricultural sector in South Africa, which has seen really some growth in the past 3 years. Unfortunately, all these positive gains that we've seen are likely to regress as a result of the crisis that we are facing in the country, the crisis that relates to the energy, that it's really a problem in the country. As a result, farmers are unable to irrigate as they should. You have seen probably in the last season in 2022 that the production of onions, which are produced mostly in the central and the northern part of the country, that has gone down heavily because farmers were unable to irrigate as they should, and also as a result of the drier conditions that farmers have experienced. The same can be said about, the cabbages, as well as tomatoes and some peppers that, due to mainly load shedding as well as erratic weather conditions that we are experiencing as a country, you find that as a result, farmers are not producing as they should. And as you may know that with demand and supply, if you produce less than is demanded, by the consumer, you're likely to see the price increases. So the same was the case when it comes to onions, where production went down by about 20%. As a result, we've seen the price increases going up to as far as 47% in the case of onions. And in the case of cabbages, going to as far as, 16, 17%.
Yeah. So you're saying the Competition Commission's investigation will likely find that the most prominent feature that would have led to the kind of rise, especially maybe at production level, would have to be the scarcity of energy. There's no collusion there. There's no price fixing there at that particular point that is coming to play.
The matter that is dealt with by the Competition Commission is really an interesting matter. If you really look at it, you realize that what is happening in the fruit and veg industry is not really unique. If you look at our industry as a whole, it's an industry really characterized by, few firms concentrating the value chain. If you look in the banking space, you see the same characteristics. If you look in the grain space, you are likely to identify about 4 or 5 major players. The red meat, it's almost the same. When it comes to the vegetable space, which operates in the fresh produce market, there it's really an unfortunate situation that really needs serious interventions. If you read the Section 7 report by the National Agricultural Marketing Council that was published as far as 2006, it makes recommendations that, at least about 30% of the products that are handled through the fresh produce market should be from black farmers. But as a FASA, we have realized that that is not the case. If a farmer is to supply through our fresh produce markets, there are more red tapes, and the same can be said about by the black market agents that are representing farmers in this fresh produce market, that somehow, some way, the market really is not working. That's the invisible hand that economist speaks about is not really doing what it's supposed to do. Seemingly, there is some control somewhere. In isiXhosa, they say there is isandla semfene.
Mervyn Abrahams, the program coordinator for the Pietermaritzburg Economic Justice and Dignity Group, as well as Malapane Thamaga, agricultural economist and member of the African Association of Farmers of South Africa. Mervyn, let me come back to you. They say when it rises, when the inflation goes up, prices go up like a rocket. But when inflation is on a decline, they come down like a feather. And that's pretty much how they describe it. Is that likely going to be the case this time around?
So that's likely to be the case around food prices. I think also, Thabo, we have to understand that in the food industry and in really with regard to the food basket in the CPI, there are also other factors at play. So the correlation is not absolutely direct, that because CPI on other goods and services come down, therefore food prices will come down. I mean, there are issues like the other panelists have said about climate. There is issue about monopolization in the industry, etc. And those also contribute to food prices. Having said that, I think, Thabo, that it's critical that we should remember that inflation is part of our economic cycle. So we should be expecting at some stage that prices will go up and prices will come down. So what do we have to do? Essentially, the problem in South Africa is that our wages are so low that there are no household savings. So we are not able to actually weather the storm of some of these inflationary pressures, whether it's caused by rainfall or whether it's caused by load shedding now, because actually our wages are too low. So for instance, if we look at the national minimum wage, so a national minimum wage would have brought in a worker or a household 3,800 rand in the region of that. Transport would be 1,500. Electricity would be 780. So that leaves something like 1,500 rand to purchase food and all the other household expenditure. So it is a question around affordability. We don't have enough money in our pockets to buy the food, and so it's not just the prices, it is also the amount of money we have to buy it.
That, of course, then brings us to the conversation around the relief that is being given, be it social relief, be it the wage increases. I mean, we're hearing the public sector now saying they're getting ready for a full-blown tools down, basically kind of a situation, because the wage increases have not been keeping up. So are you saying that part of also conversations that need to be had are around those particular areas into how much social spend are we giving and how much increases are we giving to households?
Yes, so that's critical, because it is about the amount of money I have in my pocket and what I need to purchase. So when we look, for instance, at the Labour Department had recommended to the National Minimum Wage Commission that they increase the national minimum wage by 8%. Now, since that recommendation, Eskom has increased electricity tariffs by 18%. Now, that will take away possibly 4% out of that potential 8% increase. So workers will, in fact, be poorer than they were a year ago. And that's part of the dynamic of the South African economy. So we really have to look at historical low wages. We have to look at firming up social security. I mean, just one example. So, for instance, it costs about 853 rand to feed a child a nutritious meal a month. The current child support grant is 480 rand, almost 400 rand less. So there is this kind of disconnect between the food poverty line, between social grants, and between wages and the costs of essential goods and services like food, electricity, and transport.
All right. Malapane, rather, I want us to talk about this. This is rather interesting for me, because the Competition Authority is saying, no, we want to probe and have a look at this. And I'm interested in what you're saying. Are you saying there is a particular behavior in the industry that seeks to isolate the black farmer in particular from accessing the markets? How does this impact on efficiency within the sector in terms of production, but also in terms of price?
Mr. Mjuli, we operate our economy on the basis of, the free market system. We make an assumption that as we come into the market as farmers, we are all equal, or we come from the same background. We can be able to produce the product of the same quality, and therefore there's some sort of fairness. But reality is that when you go into the market, there are requirements that, farmers, especially emerging farmers, are, faced with. They range from the quantities that are required. You are unable to make a specific deal if you are unable to produce specific quantities that are required by the market. As though that is not enough, you're also required to produce some certification of some sort to show that you can produce the quality of product that is required by the market. And sometimes, in addition, you are required to go as far as having to package the product in a manner that is required, by the final or the retailer who is the buyer on the other side. Those barriers, they play a huge role in having black farmers mainly to be mainstreamed into our economy. Maybe just to add to what my colleague here has been saying, Mr. Abrahams, that perhaps there's a need somewhere to heavily subsidize emerging farmers, especially when it comes to the input cost that they have to incur, especially when it comes to all the certifications that they have to go through, so that as they go into the market, at least we are able to correct this market that seemingly it's supposed to work on its own, and unfortunately it's not.
Yeah. Now, as far as I know, you've engaged the president previously on farmers' issues, but are you looking at a possibility of particular pieces of legislation and some work on some of the regulations at a level of government that would need to change in order to be able to deal with those barriers to participation?
I think, Mr. Mzuli, the Commission of Inquiry, by the Competition Commission, it's really a good start. Because then once you have dealt with the fresh produce market, then you are able to move on the basis of facts rather than just, moving on the basis of feelings. And once you have dealt with that, then you look at other hindrances that black farmers are facing in the agricultural sector. You move into the finance space, you also move into other red tapes that black farmers are really facing. So unfortunately, the associations that represent farmers on their own are unable to get to a point where they can say, this is how we should go about it. But I think this inquiries, Commission of Inquiries, are likely to give direction which is required, and ultimately you will see the inclusive economy that our president speaks about, getting to where we want to see it getting to. If I were to project to you here, Mr. Mzuli, the contribution of black farmers into the agriculture sector, you will be shocked and you wonder if indeed a black farmer cannot farm, but that is not true. It's because of all these hindrances that a farmer faces. And like Mr. Abraham was saying, at the same time, a labor will require, an adequate pay. But unfortunately, our farmers are unlikely to afford that. So if you were to look into heavily subsidizing, such costs, you are likely to yield something that is very positive, so that as we go into the globe and compete with other markets which are heavily subsidized, we are able to also compete on par.
Yeah. Mervyn, as we always do, we like to wrap it up with some little bit of advice from your side. I mean, from looking into your glass window there and looking ahead at 2023, what is likely going to happen as far as these prices are concerned, and what are consumers supposed to do? How do they respond to that?
So really, I mean, there are, for us, from where we are seated, there are very little indication that prices are going to come down. So really what we are asking people is to, of course, spend wisely, whatever little bits of money you've got. We know you don't have enough, so spend wisely. But really what we're going to need is government has got to come on board and begin to look at, so for instance, I mean, my other panel colleague have said about the inefficiencies within the system, the challenges within the food value system. We're actually going to have to ask what is going on, and it's the first step by the Competition Commission, which we welcome very much. But really we're going to have to look at what is the producers doing, what kind of profits are they putting on? What kind of profits are the retail sector putting on? We've got to try and find to bring prices down at the same time as we begin to increase both social grants and wages.
Gentlemen, I appreciate you both. Thank you very much for coming on tonight and helping us in this conversation. That's Mervyn Abrahams, the Programs Coordinator for the Pietermaritzburg Economic Justice and Dignity Group, as well as agricultural economist and member of AFASA, Malapane Thamaga.